Welcome to Climbing the Immune Ladder Steps for Success in Science, IASIAR podcast, the show where we explore inspiring experiences in science and the untold stories shaping our community. Today we'll be your hosts. I'm Shahar Reddy.
And I'm Priya Goswami.
We are PhD students in the Professor Amira Maria Lab in the University of Haifa in Israel. In each episode, we will deep dive into conversations with experts on innate immunity in sterile inflammation, autoimmunity, and the resolution to bring you insights, ideas, and inspirations you won't hear anywhere else, whether you're tuning in during your morning coffee or while you're doing your lab bench work. Get ready to learn, laugh, and see the world from a new perspective. Let's get started. Our today's guest is Professor Mauro Teixeira from the University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. He heads the Center for Advanced and Innovative Therapies and is a member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, the World Academy of Sciences, and the National Order of Scientific Merit. He is recognized globally for his leadership in dengue research and contributions during a COVID-19 pandemic. He has published over 800 papers with numerous citations and currently serves as Vice President of the International Association of Inflammation Societies and Chair of the Immunotherapy Committee at the International Union of Immunological Societies. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Shahar. Hi, Priya. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about your line of research?
So I did my PhD in London. At the time, working very much with eosinophil migration. It was when, early 90s. That was pretty much the time when chemokines popped up and people were really interested in the signals these molecules gave for leukocytes to migrate and move around. So I was mostly interested in chemokines driving eosinophil influx, using very advanced technology and my indium labeling of cells. And then I went home, so this is very Brazilian. We always want to go home. And I think I'm actually quite glad I did. It's a feeling that your contribution is much larger when you are in a place where you can make much more of a difference, not only as a scientist, but as a head of research. So as things evolve, you change a little bit. You have to adapt to new circumstances, to new realities, new funding schemes. So throughout the years, we worked a little bit with chemokines in the context of infection. And in the last 5-10 years or so, we focused much more on the concept of resolving inflammation and how inflammation actually gets better. And I'm a clinician actually by background, and this is something that makes a lot of sense from the point of view of treatment. You want to treat things. Inflammation resolution is about going back to normal. It's about treatment. So that's why I quite enjoy, and that's what we've been doing for the last few years, trying to dissect mediators of inflammation and understand how they function.
Interesting. You think as a medical doctor, as a clinician, you had any advantage or disadvantage in the research world?
Research is about new ideas, new ways of thinking. I think being a clinician is different. We are very interested in applied models, setting up disease models, trying to translate into humans the questions, but we're very bad at asking mechanistic questions. It's not bad in the sense that it's a bit boring to us. Understanding the phenomenon is really important, but understanding the relevance of the phenomenon is what drives me more, right? So, and I think the more I see research, I think it's about interacting with people, accepting their different points of view. It's a very anti-Trump world, actually, in the sense that you need to embrace the differences and and live with them and making the best out of them. So that's how I see things.
Very insightful.
Beyond scientific curiosity, is there any personal motivation that has kept you passionate about working in immunology all these years?
There's a very big drive where I lived for infection. I think the world became aware of infections again after COVID, but that's something that we've been dealing with for many years. And if you deal with infection, it's at the heart of immunology, right? We believe immunology was uh, selected by evolution uh, to play a major role in dealing with it. Uh, so to me, working with infection and immunology is very obvious. There's no other way around. But on the other hand, if you move around, and as an inflammatologist, right, someone interested in inflammation and its relevance, there's inflammation everywhere. And, it doesn't mean that you will be able to treat inflammation to treat some diseases, right? But I'm sure there is a role for inflammation in most diseases. Inflammation is about remodeling. It's about the organism adapting to things. So it's at the very core of that. So I quite like that as well. So I very much like the infection and the physiology role. I think immunology has a very strange bias. If you teach medical students, anyone, about the physiology of the heart, you say, oh, the heart functions like this normally. Your muscle functions like this normally without any outside stress. When you teach about immunology, you put an outside stress. You say infection, you say cancer. That's not physiology, that's pathology. That's disease. So, what is the physiological role of inflammation is something that, to me, is a very central question. And I like thinking about it. And that's actually one of the reasons we start playing with resolution as well, because I think it's very central to this normal physiology. So, yeah, I think there's, again, these different ways of seeing things that I quite enjoy. Actually, being from a developing country, working in a developing country, there are different difficulties. I mean, there are always difficulties doing science that everyone has to face. Ours is completely different from other people, and ours is access to technology, access to reagents, access to discussions, uh, because we are, really far out, and I suppose for you guys as well, that can be difficult at times. You know, you have to travel to talk to anyone. 8 hours. So I think as you do that, you have to think differently, and I think, and this is really important for science. Look at a phenomenon and try to look at your own way, not necessarily other people's way. Yeah.
Looking back, was there any pivotal moment, whether carefully planned or completely serendipitous, that shaped your career?
I think there were several moments. I think, Shah. Um, the I was doing medical residence and I decided to do a PhD. There was a moment that shifted a lot. That I was not really happy just doing usual medical work. I wanted something different. But to me, that was really interesting. Again, now back in Brazil in the late 90s, mid 90s, or late 90s. We were already working with germ-free mice at the time, before it was trendy. Uh, and we made a very interesting observation, and at the time, that these mice uh, did not respond so well to most inflammatory stimulation. Uh, you know, and that was really cool because we were not expecting that at all. We were expecting more response because they never saw LPS, so they would respond more. But in fact, they don't. It's not that they don't; they respond differently. And this is how actually we started the whole work on resolution of inflammation and things like that. So I think to me, that was quite early when I returned home to Brazil, and I think that was quite cool from the point of view that you it's okay to make mistakes in the lab, right? When you're learning, when your students is learning, as long as it's controlled, you need to control and interpret it correctly. Uh, uh, so I think to me that was quite an interesting finding at the time because we were never expecting that. We thought we made a huge mistake, so we repeated it and said, "Look, this is true. So how do we explain it? How do we go about understanding it?" And that actually preceded a little bit this boom of the germ-free world, uh, which we missed a lot for the bad reason, Jad. We when we were really doing our most interesting work with germ-free, we lost the colony because our infrastructure is really bad, and it took us like 8 years to get a new colony back. So then the wave was gone. This is part of life. Living in when you don't have such good conditions of work. So be creative. Have to change. You do have to change. So have to adapt. Uh, uh, that means you miss out some of opportunities, but also means that you have to be creative enough to find novel ones, right? Uh, uh, you, you know, you don't cut corners, but you go around the corners and face them and see how to move forward. Yeah, so that was quite game changing for us. That early discovery, it was by chance, and uh, I think we made the most of it. Yeah.
How many repetitions do you think is enough to solidify that this is not working or we are mistaken, and that's not something technical?
That's a good point. It's all about confidence, right? The confidence of the student in himself, of the supervisor in the student, in the whole process. If everybody's doing, you know, everything correctly and there is trust within the team, it's just a few, just to make sure, you are looking at a correct thing. And it was quite obvious that it didn't seem to be anything wrong. You know, uh, it's just that we needed to interpret or ask the right question because our question was completely wrong. Uh, so there was nothing wrong. So I think it's about trust. I don't think there's a good number there. If you trust in your experiment, in the process, go for it.
You have contributed significantly to global health challenges such as dengue and COVID 19. What advice would you give to the next generation of scientists on how they can best prepare to address future pandemics and global health crises?
Priya, I've been discussing this a lot, in the aftermath. We could only contribute it to COVID because we were prepared. So pandemic preparedness is exactly what it means. You have to be ready before. There's nothing you do once things are happening. We actually did a lot of clinical studies with COVID because we knew how to do clinical studies. We tested a vaccine for COVID and it was eventually used in Brazil because we knew how to do vaccine studies. We are now doing vaccine studies for dengue. We have drugs for dengue. We have studies on mosquito based strategies to deal with dengue simply because we know how to do it. So we are prepared to do things. Whatever you do well, do it for the pandemic. If you're a neuroscientist, contribute in that way and you will do well. I think that's pretty much it. You know, there is a limit for reinventing yourself in the middle of a pandemic, right? You can always reinvent, ask different questions, but there is a limit to that. Most of the major findings was not about reinvention. They were about, You were ready, you were willing to accept the challenge, and people took the challenge and contributed. We had good vaccines because we knew about SARS-CoV-1, we knew about MERS, right? We learned a lot from these things. We knew a lot about virus. We knew a lot about vaccines. We knew a lot about lipid nanoparticles, and we used that. So I think it's really about using the most of what you have. I have these high level discussions on pandemic preparedness, and governments want to set up all these new institutes. The worst way of getting ready for a pandemic or dealing with the pandemic is give money to governments because they don't know what to do. They give to the wrong people. It's just a nightmare. At some stage, a lot of people doing excellent work were not getting money. A lot of people not doing good work were getting a lot of money. So this is all about bad choices. So you need to give money to scientists, not necessarily to to governments. And a lot of the discussion is about that.
What's the process for identifying high impact research questions?
Wow. I I I think this is a very American way of thinking, right? This is too much United States. It's about good research. You know, do good research, ask good questions. It may not eventually be published in the best journals, but it will be good science. It will modify knowledge. And I think that's what people should be worried about. I think the idea of publishing it only in nature journals is science. This is very American because they are competing for the same pot of money and they only give to themselves. They control the editorial boards of things. Science has to do about something that comes from you. You believe, you want to find out, you want to advance, you want to discover. If you do that, then eventually you will do impact science. You know, impact science is not about publishing at Nature; it's about changing science. The aim is not to publish at Nature or Science. The aim is to do good science that will change people's lives. If that is published in Nature, Science, if you're a clinician, Lancet, New England, all these really top journals, this is really cool. Uh, but if not, you've done your best. You've done what you believe. I think I keep repeating certain words. It's belief, what you like. It has to be fun, right? If you are in a toxic environment, it can generate good science, but it's your life is really, you know, I cannot say the word. It's your life. You're living your life as you're doing science. So do good things in a good way. You know, it's not about wasting your life for a project. That will generate good science, I think. Yeah.
I really love that outlook. So, do you have any strategies or mindsets that help you go through like tough scientific questions and hurdles? Like, have to go over the wall?
So depending on an environment, getting a research grant can be your wall that you're talking about, right? uh, 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 and then you get your grant, you have to do your experiments. You don't have the animals. You can't buy the antibody you want. You can't. So there are so many walls. So it's different that if you're here, in Brazil or in Africa or I suppose in Israel, you're in Midway, someone in Harvard does not have the hurdles I have, right? So he can actually worry about the scientific questions. If you are at a real frontier of things, everybody will have the hurdles and how to, go over these really hard scientific questions, right? Uh, Not easy, certainly not easy. Uh, when you reach that place and you're competing with everyone else for a breakthrough, first of all, our science is not based on this really incredible Einstein-like discovery, right? It's about block by block, right? So you understand the literature, you look at it, and then you think what you can contribute. You do your experiment thinking that. So what, what is my point of view on that? And how do I interpret what I find? And then you move. I think we tend to believe there are these really enormous breakthroughs, but they're incredibly rare, right? In normal life, even significant breakthroughs are small things that someone added and had a different view on the topic. If you think on the link between TLRs and adaptive immunity, I mean, it's such a huge jump, that someone coined that. It was there. All the knowledge was there. Finding TLRs, we have to remember, tau like receptors was based on an insect that has nothing to do with adaptive immunity. And then the whole idea of seeing innate immunity and then putting it together was something that was built step by step. And there were some really nice insights because people were thinking about it in their own way. So what I'm trying to say is there is nothing magical. It's just about you applying your way of thinking to the problem. You will be applying what you know, so your techniques, your way of doing, your way of thinking, your way of seeing to that, and that may reach you and go over that hurdle. I That's all you can do is to do your best and think about it and give your point of view rather than someone else's, and rather than doing that because everyone is doing. Immunology has this waves of things. You go to meetings and everybody's about T-Rex. Got a Nobel Prize for that. Everybody was T-Rex. And then everything was Th17. And everything before was Th1, Th2. And then everything was inflammasome, IL-1. And you have these waves that everything in the meeting is about that. So that is really boring. Obviously, that advances, that goes over the wall, right? Because different people are giving their own perspective on the thing. So let's that's the usual way. So if you do what you believe, what you want, you will advance as much as you can. Yeah.
Can you share with us any crucial decision or opportunity that significantly advanced your career?
I actually mentioned it before. A decision to move out of Brazil at an early stage. So I actually did a strange decision for my country because people would do their PhDs and then go outside for postdoc. I went to do a PhD outside. So that was an early decision because it was what was available then. Would I do differently? Probably. But obviously, you reflect. I would probably have more clinical experience before going, but I didn't. I think it's really important that the students communicate in the language of science, which is English. It may change, but it's English at the moment. I think international experiences are really useful. So going abroad is something important. Or maybe if you don't go abroad, you go to a different lab to see different ways of thinking because, you know, science goes back to the really old ways of doing things in humanity. You remember you had people teaching craft to others, right? So you teach your student what you know, he learns what you know, right? So if that's true, if he doesn't experience others, he will only experience you. So you will not learn other ways of thinking. So that's why I think at some stage people need to experience other groups. And I would strongly recommend experience groups that think differently because it's useful to see that different perspective. Then you start having your own perspective on doing things. To me, that was very crucial. And I do believe that experiencing different ways of doing things is very important. Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you evaluate and seize new opportunities while managing existing commitments?
I'm Brazilian, so we adapt. We are adopting people. This is a young country. We have only a 500 years old history. If you don't adapt, things will not happen. I say one thing, and this is true for all of South America, all of Africa, most of Southeast Asia, most of Asia, I would say, is that, you know, it's very good to work in Brazil because you can do almost everything, full of opportunities. It's very bad in Brazil because you have to do everything, right? So you can do everything, but you have to do everything. Meaning, yes, let's work with animals. Yes, but then we have to generate the animal. We have to create the infrastructure for the animals, hire everybody to take care of the animals, create the law to handle animals, right? So if you are in such environment, then your commitments will simply tend to get larger and larger, more managerial as you go along. But it's fine. As long as you enjoy what you're doing. I wish I could only do science full time. I do science full time, not doing science full time. I think you do need to keep the perspective of enjoying what you're doing, because then it doesn't become a burden. The other commitments that come, helping students, doing experiments, seeing patients, management, writing grants, is just part of a big process. Yeah. Science is your life, right? So make it part of life and not a burden to life. You don't get paid well, so you might as well enjoy it, right?
Is there any like non-scientific skill that you think are very critical for progression and career?
Collaborate, interact is to me the most relevant skill ever. I think more and more and more science will be about interaction. It's getting too complex to answer very complex questions. Complex questions need complex solutions. You're never able to do it alone. So you need to interact. Interact is the single most relevant thing that I tell my students to do. Interact, learn with others. You need to talk to people. You need to learn how to handle them, handle their problems, handle your problem. So interaction is a big thing on its own, and there are many things to interact, right? You need to learn how to communicate. You need to be polite. You need to listen. I think all of these things are incredibly important. I know there are examples of good scientists. There are not good humans, but in general, a good scientist, a good human. It's a human endeavor. Need to be human. Use your human skills to do science. I think. Yeah.
So that's a wrap for today's episode of Climbing the Immune Ladder, Steps for Success in Science, IISIAR podcast. A huge thanks to our guest, Professor Mauro Teixeira, for sharing his insights, stories, and experiences with us. We are grateful for your time and the depth of your explanation. We hope our listeners found this conversation as inspiring and thought-provoking as we did. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to join us on the next one and share it with anyone who might benefit from it. You can also follow us on our web page to stay updated on future episodes and innate immunity updates. Thank you for listening, and remember, persistence and asking the right questions are what drive science, and maybe even your own journey. Until next time, stay curious.